My name is Jim Dawkins. I'll be your host and moderator. I'm Elecosoft's channel manager for North America. I work with an amazing network of authorized partners for Powerproject. They're scheduling experts and in many cases, experts in more than one tool, not just Powerproject. So they really are really well positioned to help you with your scheduling questions, but also to compare and contrast the various tools. Joining me today is Megan DePody. Megan will be presenting and doing the heavy lifting with the product. Megan brings to the table a career in scheduling with lots of experience using not just Powerproject, but Primavera and Microsoft Project in her work at contractors. And so we're very lucky to have her on board with Elecosoft. We're running our webinar today from our office in Denver, Colorado. You may not have heard of Elecosoft. Elecosoft is a company with a global presence and a growing presence in the United States. We have offices across Europe, EMEA, South America. We have certainly an office here in the US as well. And it may surprise you to know that just on Powerproject alone, we have over 120,000 global users. It is certainly the preferred tool and the standard with the lion's share of the market share in the UK, and it's growing rapidly elsewhere, particularly in the US, and this number is already low. We have over 4,500 users alone in the US. Well, of those users, who specifically, what companies are you using Powerproject? We've got hundreds of contractors running Powerproject today. I can't put them all on one screen, but I wanted to give you a sample of not only some significant folks that are making use of Powerproject, so it's not a new tool. We've had it in the US for 7 years now, and the adoption's growing terrifically. They're using it on very large projects. But big name logos are helpful, but you want to know that contractors of all sizes are making use of it. Is this just a tool for big contractors? Well, that's absolutely not the case. We also have a growing presence among the universities. We have free educational licenses for valid universities. And you may be surprised to find that your next new hire was trained how to schedule in Powerproject. We're growing out our content for the professors, so if you work at a university or know someone who does, please reach out to us and we can make Powerproject available to you. We really think it is critical to be supportive of the educational process and make sure all of those going through construction management today have some visibility into Powerproject and at least have access to an easy scheduling tool. So let's talk about our content today and why we suggest that Powerproject really is a better tool than Microsoft Project, specifically within construction. So I'll let the cat out of the bag and tell you right away that Microsoft Project can be a very easy tool to use. But we talk about Powerproject as easy to use as well. So how can we do that? Well, it's really about how you're making use of these tools. Powerproject is built for construction. You'll discover that Microsoft Project was not. It's a great general purpose tool and can be very easy to use on many types of IT projects. You'll find it's very straightforward. There are some requirements specific to construction that make Microsoft Project much more difficult to use, and in fact, may not satisfy all your contractual needs. You'll find papers, AACE, CMAA, people presenting papers all the time talking about how can I use Microsoft Project in construction. And if you read those papers or attend those webinars or seminars, you'll discover, yeah, I can use it, but I'm going to have to do lots of things specific to the way I use it. And if I don't, it's really not appropriate. So that's a caveat you'll not see many places. So for instance, Microsoft Project is not a progress-based tool. In construction, we have to document not only what we plan to do, but where are we as of a specific data date or progress period date. And that's a specific requirement in many contracts. And by the way, it's excellent practice and an accepted practice specification from AACE. We also support what I'm calling here is true critical path methodology. What do I mean by that? Well, certainly Megan will go into more detail, but the calculation in Microsoft Project does not match the critical path calculation used in Powerproject or that used in Primavera, another very popular tool out there, and accepted standards and often set as requirements as well. Now, owners may not recognize this. It calls itself a critical path calculating tool, and I'll let Megan go into the specifics of that. But it's something you need to look out for. There are no logic limits. In construction, we will often use something called ladder scheduling, where we'll have not only one relationship between activity A and B, we may have two relationships between activity A and B. We may have a start to start and a finish to finish, or there may be some lags in there that are incorporated with those relationships. Those can be critical to be represented and enforced within a construction schedule. So, and we can talk about why, some positive examples about that. Microsoft Project does also not support what are called hammocks. PMI calls them hammocks activities. Primavera changed the name and calls them level of effort activities. We'll talk about why those are important. Certainly speak to, I don't know why Microsoft Project doesn't represent them, but why you might want to make use of them. We also support longest path, which is another way of calculating that long critical path. What is the longest path through the logical progression of activities in my schedule? So that's a lot of things that are very different in construction that people use all the time in construction that are missing and or inadequately represented in Microsoft Project. Again, I said, we talk about how it's easy to use. You'll find that the terrific Windows functionality that you don't find in more complicated tools like Primavera, drag and drop, and the cut and paste and things you're used to in Excel and other tools that you may use all day long are represented the same way in Powerproject. We have full unlimited baselines. And perhaps this should be up under construction. Because we are constantly capturing a snapshot, and by the way, let me pause. When I say baseline here, I'm not talking about just the original contracted schedule, which is referred to as our baseline schedule. People also capture user baselines for progress updates throughout the life of a schedule. So every time you provide the progress into the schedule in construction, that may happen monthly, may happen more often. Our most aggressive customer is updating daily, but usually it's weekly or monthly, something along those lines. But you'll capture a snapshot of the schedule, and you need that for contractual purposes to document where you were as of a certain date. If you're limited in the number of baselines, as Microsoft Project is with 10, and you have a 12-month project or a multi-year project, you're going to find that you're going to have to do something else besides the baseline procedure. We have an application, an app that sits on your phone. It allows you to take pictures, but provide that progress update. Let's make it easy as possible to get those updates into the schedule with an approval process. We can create that, we can document it with notes or a picture to say, here's why we are where we should be, or it's going to take a little bit longer. Lastly, Powerproject is licensed for construction. Microsoft Project is licensed a couple of different ways through Office 365. There's a monthly subscription, but at the end of the day, the licensing is per user, which is great when you have Outlook open all day. Do you have your scheduling tool open all day? Most of our users, that's not the case. So we have shared or concurrent licensing. that drops the cost to less than Microsoft Project per user. Why buy an expensive tool to sit on your desktop or to access in the cloud either when you're not going to use it all the time? Why pay for that full user? So we're not going to make you. So with that said, we're going to unpack some of these capabilities and show you precisely how easy it is to use. Before we get to that, however, I want to launch a quick poll. So I'd like to see how many of our users are using which tool. This is actually, so go ahead and the question is predominantly used. So pick the one you'd use most of the time and then go ahead and submit your answer. I'll give you a few seconds to get those in. It does help us live during webinars like this to make mention of not just perhaps Microsoft Project, but if we've got some Primavera folks out there, or folks who aren't using a scheduling tool of any kind, that helps tailor our content a bit. So, and every time we do this webinar, we hope to improve the content to make it more specific. We don't want to use terms you're not familiar with. I think that's the majority of our content. So, all right, let's close the poll. And it looks like, let me go ahead and share that with everybody so you can see it too. It looks like we've got kind of a nice representation of all different products here. We've got some folks that are already using Power Project. We've got some Primavera folks. We've got some Project. And we have some folks who aren't using a scheduling tool who are using Microsoft Excel, which is very common. We get lots of folks that use it to manage a task or to-do list. So I think that helps us significantly. And so with that, what I'm going to do is pull in Megan. Megan is our consultant, as I mentioned, and I'm going to make her the presenter so she can walk through some of the Power projects. So Megan will certainly want, yes, that's really what I want to do. So Megan, we'll certainly want to keep in mind that we've got, probably 30% Primavera and 30% Microsoft Excel users as well. So let's kind of, let me just hide because I can't see what you're doing unless I hide my poll. So let's kind of keep that in mind while we're walking through the tool, if you don't mind. You there?
Great, I am.
All right.
All right, so first thing to think about, we want to get started is, why did you adopt Project to begin with? Or if you are those people who just responded in the poll, why are you maybe thinking about adopting Project or comparing to Microsoft Project? Some pretty common answers are, it was already on my computer. My company paid for an Office suite that included it. It's not an additional cost. It'll seem easy to use. Again, that's for specific things. It seems easy to use. It seems like you can kind of jump in and get started. I've found typically that once you start using it and try and do more than just some basic adding of activities, it becomes less easy to use. But most people are familiar with Microsoft and other Microsoft projects, so they figure, I can figure this out. I know how to use Word and Excel and PowerPoint and all of these. I'm pretty sure I can figure this out. If not, everything Microsoft has plenty of Google results if I have a problem. These are all very reasonable reasons, but they don't really require you to do a review of the appropriateness of that. As you look closer at your options, you'll see that Microsoft Project, as Jim mentioned, was most definitely not built for construction. So you need to be asking yourself, does it really do what I need it to do? So we'll get to that here in a little bit. Again, Microsoft Project is designed to create a schedule very quickly and easily. But once you have to add progress to that or make changes, it doesn't deal with that very well. Power Project does both of those while still being easy to use. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I mean here in Power Project. I'm going to start here with how easy it is to create a schedule, which is in Powerproject, which is one of kind of our hallmark selling points, bullet points. From there, I will then show you how easy it is to update it with progress, to manage changes, and then we'll look at some potential challenges you might be facing within Microsoft Project or Excel. I'll mention those as well. That hopefully we can help you overcome by using Powerproject. So schedule creation is very simple. If I come here, I can select new. We have templates. I can have templates saved at a company level. I can have my own, but a template can include all my tasks. A template can be like a base schedule that if I do a lot of similar projects, I can have a template that is apartment complex type A, or especially if we have if users who do things like they have contracts with various retailers, and I build the specific type of store, and so I might have a default schedule as a template for whatever store that might be that I can use as a starting point, and then I just need to adjust it for that specific project. So I'm going to go ahead and use a template. I can create one. I'm going to be incredibly creative here. Oh, and I used the wrong template. I have multiple versions here going, and I chose poorly. There we go. So I will open my template here. You can see I have two tabs. This is actually two different schedules. So here I have a schedule that's already completed that I'll jump to a little bit later. And this is a new blank schedule. So I can have multiple schedules open at the same time in different tabs. I can also have multiple views of the same schedule. So if I'm looking at different parts of the schedule at the same time, I can kind of jump back and forth between them. So again, with schedule creation, it can be the most tedious part of building your schedule is the data entry, is getting your tasks into Powerproject. Typing in the names, doing the durations, assigning the logic, it can take a long time. So Powerproject offers many ways to hopefully reduce the amount of time you spend on that. First of all, I can copy and paste straight from Excel. So those of you using Excel, I'm going to venture that you're working on something that looks similar to this anyway. I've seen much more elaborate versions. This is a relatively basic one. But real quick, I want to show you, kind of highlight some pitfalls to scheduling using Excel. One is that there's a lot of manual work in when I update things, when I make changes. I have to think about, okay, if I'm changing the day that my excavation ends, what other tasks down the line is that going to affect the start or finish dates? So it takes a lot of kind of manual having to really think through and spend time making sure you've taken into account anything that could be affected further down the line. And I also have to manually do things like block out holidays. Here I have 4th of July and I have work scheduled. By using a scheduling tool, I can have those days automatically blocked out on my calendar. So between Excel and Powerproject, I can copy and paste individual cells, entire rows, entire columns, or groups of cells. So here I'm going to copy the task name, the duration, and my start date. I could also copy my finish date. I'm not going to, specifically because of what I highlighted before with things like it's taking into account working on the holiday. So I want my software to calculate the finish date based on what I'm planning on starting and what my duration is going to be. So I'm going to just do a simple copy. Come back here and paste. And now my tasks have all been brought over. Now there's no logic ties between them. I can do that as I would if I was using like Primavera. I can add a column for that or open up project details pane and kind of code those in. But I can also simply draw them. I can say that I know when I am a certain amount of time into this task. 5 days in, I want to start this, that when this task starts, I want to start here. So I don't have to know scheduling terminology with different types of logic ties or things like that to be able to create my initial schedule. I can do it visually. I can do it, without experience in scheduling tools. So that's one quick way to get information in. A second way is what we have called task pools. Now, a task pool is a group of activities that is saved in my template, but is not a part of my schedule. So I have these all saved here, and I can choose which ones I want to incorporate in my schedule. The task pools have the activities. They can have, if I'm adding resources or costs or activity type codes to help me organize my schedule, all of those can be saved in my task pool, logic ties between tasks. So all of these are in my template. I have multiples here. So if I go back to my schedule, I can select which I want to add into my schedule, and I just drag them over. And now that whole section, those tasks are all a part of my schedule. So if I add a few of them, I can then all I have to do is create ties between them, and then, generally adjust durations for, the specific project, maybe add in some activities that, are specific to this one, or, delete something that does not apply. So make some changes like that. But in general, a lot of my kind of legwork and busy work and data entry is already done for me. I have the basis of my schedule done very quickly and easily. So kind of gotten through the creation of a schedule here. I'm going to jump over to my already created one. So in construction, we use a schedule in a variety of ways on an ongoing basis throughout the entire project, and a lot of times after it's complete as well. So when your project inevitably runs into challenges, delays, changes, any of the multitudes of things that happen on a construction project, Powerproject can be used as a professional way to document what you knew and when you knew it. Hopefully you don't end up in a situation at the end where you're having to prove or document what you knew and when you knew it, but we can help you with that if and when that does become a challenge that you face, that if you are working with a software, working with Powerproject throughout the life of your project, you can kind of have that ready to go and not have to spend a lot of time going back and trying to, look at daily logs and comparing your 3-week schedules from one week to another to figure out when you realize there was an issue with something. I can just have it all right here if I happen to need it later. Hopefully you don't, but if I need it, it can be right there. So we update and progress our schedules regularly so that we can know not only our plan for the future, but also what's already taken place. The project was not designed for this. There's no where are we as of now functionality. As Jim said, experts speak at conferences regularly about how to correctly update in Microsoft Project, and it can be done, but it's kind of an afterthought, and there are a lot of potential pitfalls. Really, there's, in other industries, which Microsoft Project is more geared for, there's really no need to see what should have been done or what we thought was going to be done but isn't now. But that's a very critical function in construction scheduling. So one of the big differences here is that the calculations that Jim was talking about. In Microsoft Project, regardless of where you are in the project, whether you're day one just creating the project or halfway through or at the very end, when you do the recalculate or reschedule button, it calculates everything from the start of the schedule. So I can have in my Microsoft Project schedule tasks that are incomplete but show in the past. is dates in the past. I can have tasks that are already completed but have dates in the future. So it can be really hard to see what actually is happening and when, and to really see changes between schedules. So again, this all comes down to kind of tracking and managing your schedule. Baselines are a big part of this. Jim mentioned them. Depending on who you're talking to in the construction world, baseline, if you're talking to your owner, they probably mean the contractual schedule. When you're using a scheduling tool, we refer to a baseline as essentially a snapshot of my schedule at any specific point in time. So it's important to create a baseline before I update, so I can always go back and compare and say, okay, what did it look like before I did this update? What does it look like now that I've added this information I have? And I can see the differences. Now, Microsoft Project does not baseline logic. It does not baseline any constraints I have in there, and it doesn't baseline the critical path. So, a lot of project users assume that, okay, I'm baselining the schedule, and then if I need to recreate it, I can go ahead and do that from the baseline, but you can't. You have to do a backup or a file save as prior to baselining, which can cause problems. I know in the past myself, I have accidentally, saved over an update. So I had a, save as that was labeled as a July update that actually was the August one, and then I lost the July one. So having the baselines within the software can help kind of reduce the human error and make sure that you always have those copies. So back to updating. Again, Microsoft Project doesn't require you to set the status date, which is also called a data date or a progress date or an update date. It's all the same thing. It's the date I'm putting in information as of. So when I'm updating here, it's the information I knew as of the end of the day on Friday, or whatever date you put in. So again, the problem there is that Microsoft Project then doesn't calculate based on that date. They calculate based on the project start. So I'm going to show you here. It can be done quickly and easily in Powerproject. It is not a complicated thing to do here. So I'm going to see right now I have my progress period date save showing here is the end of April, but I don't have any progress in April. I can see that because these dark lines here, in this case, dark blue lines are showing the progress I have on tasks, and I don't have any as of up to this date. Everything was as of the end of March. I can change which progress period I'm using very easily. So I'm going to go back. So now I have my progress period here. I'm going to go ahead and baseline. All I need to do is say new, give it a date. So we're going to say this is the end of April. Apparently a little behind in my updating. And that's it. So now I have an update here, or a baseline here from before I updated. So now I can go back and change that progress period. Again, I just right click and say this is the entry period I want it to be. Now for next month, I don't have another one pre-created. I can again just right click, create a new one, and give it a date. And I have my next one ready to go. So I can, again, as Jim mentioned, we have unlimited baselines, so I can compare as many iterations of my schedule as I want at any given time. Adding progress to tasks is easy. I can do it in a column. I can fill in a % complete or a remaining duration, actual start and finish dates. I can just click on a task, and either down here at the bottom or up here, I can just put in a % complete or type one in. So there are many very simple ways to get that information in. So it's really not a complicated process. As Jim mentioned too, we've got a mobile app, so you can have your people in the field, when they get a task done, say, yep, we finished framing this section. And so you know when things happened. Or again, you can take pictures and have those notes assigned. So our goal really is to make it as easy as possible to get the actual information in and to keep your schedule maintained and up to date. We can also, why do you want to have all of these baselines? What good does it do to be able to compare to baselines? So there are a lot of options here. I'm going to go ahead here and show you a couple of options of ways you can compare to a baseline. I mean, there are many different ways you can compare baselines. I can come here and just look at series of dates. You can see here I have different baselines are different colors compared to my actual, so I can visually see. I can also have views where I look at variances. So I can come in and see that this is a formula here that tells me, I can give it ranges and say whether I'm right on with my duration or my finish date or start date, whether I'm, just a little off, whether I'm very off. So there's a lot of information that can be compared to. That's a whole another webinar in and of itself. So we can, back to my other one here, it's easy to make it look like what you want. And some challenges once you start using Microsoft Project to schedule your work. It can be really hard to format your display or to summarize. Within Powerproject, you can format your bars here to be color-coded based on a code or a resource. So right now, they're all this green. I have a red check mark here, which means, I don't have that contractor assigned because contractor is what's showing. So I can change that and make floor level my display library. So now you can see these are color-coded based on floors. So I can format to have, my bars. Here I have the line number showing. I can have either various pieces of information related to the tasks, either on the, the left side, the right side, or on top of each bar. In my format tab, I can quickly and easily turn off and on things like the critical path or my logic ties. So it's not difficult to make it look how I want. I can summarize and group tasks very easily. I just highlight and click summarize. So I can create some, maybe I want some subgroupings in here. And if I open here, you'll see I haven't given them any names yet. Maybe I have a phase A and a phase B, but I can see in my project hierarchy here on the left that those are included there. I can reorganize. I can drag tasks from one to another. I can move these around, so it's very flexible to really make it look how you want. I can, there are various options for how to group and sort things, to filter, with dragging and dropping. If I want to assign activity codes to something, it really is as easy as just dragging and dropping it onto a task. So there are many ways to do that. Microsoft Project and in sometimes Excel, in Primavera, a lot of times it's hard to print how you want to see it. We have a general, what you see is what you get printing. If I press the print preview there, you can see it looks pretty similar to what I've got on the screen with any areas I have rolled up, the columns I have. But I can also, while I'm in here, say, you know what? Oh, I forgot to turn off my logic. I don't want to print it with my logic showing. I can turn that off. But then when I close my print preview, it will still be showing on my screen that I'm working on. So I can kind of make changes here. We also have flexibility in our, we call it a border. There are some kind of built in that you get when you use our kind of default templates. You can also create your own, but you're not restricted to a header or a footer or certain number of squares. You can put things on top of your Gantt chart, on all sides. You can do pictures, you can include histograms, you can There are I've seen some great, really creative ways to include anything of, renderings of the site, pictures of other projects, all sorts of things on your schedule and print it out. Again, that, copy and paste into and out of Excel. I can do that with any pieces of information, and it doesn't need to be formatted any particular way. We also have a BI export that will export large amounts of data. So very easily either to a database or to just to Excel. So it's very easy to output data to then be used in other sources. Large projects can be difficult to manage in Microsoft Project, mostly due to a lot of the just kind of navigation. We have over here the project view, which can really help in that. It acts as a kind of auto filter. If I can click on just one section, it will automatically jump to just that, so I don't have to create filters. If I can control click and select areas, I can see both of those. So I can have multiple tasks on a line. So that comes into play. Things here, I have these columns, and I'm doing the columns from basement to first floor in two different sections. I can have them show on separate lines. I can expand it because they are two separate tasks with their own logic, ties, and everything else. But to kind of clean it up so my schedule isn't 50 pages long, I can kind of close that up, really kind of clean it up, neaten it up, make it a better communication tool. Couple of other things here. Logic limits. I know that's, depending on your level of scheduling, can be a little confusing. So I'll show a quick example here. We'll jump over to this older schedule. But if I have these two tasks and I say they're going to start at the same time, which is great. But maybe if we change this here to bay framing, and this one is rough-in, maybe if I change this, that rough-in can start, let's say, 3 days after framing starts. And I reschedule it. That looks great. Let me turn off some of this extra stuff. It's confusing here. So that looks great. Get rid of the extras. But what happens if my framing all of a sudden gets delayed and starts taking this long? Well, I'm going to reschedule, and it still shows now my rough-in is finishing before my framing. So I can have a secondary tie, if I undo that here, that says my framing has to be done a certain number of days. You can see the lead lag on the bottom on the rough-in there of -4 days, 3 days, 2 days. So I'm going to say maybe 3 days before rough-in finishes. So now if my framing ends up taking a really long time, it's going to push my rough-in out as well. So that's where those logic limits come into play, because in Microsoft Project, you can't have two different ties between the same two activities. A hammock task is, or a level of effort tasks, it's really just one task that is kind of, if I want to summarize maybe these random 5 tasks that aren't necessarily a part of the same summary group or have the same activity codes, I can put them all into a hammock, and that hammock will show kind of a summary level of the duration or time or man hours, however, for those activities below it. And Microsoft Project does not support those. So I know I'm running a little behind here. So Jim, I'll go ahead and go to you for questions.
Yeah, so there was questions about the formatting of the calendar scale at the top.
Yep.
Because it's a little crunched here, but as you see, Megan can just click on something and then drag it to, there's configuration, but you can drag it open or closed to show more detail or less detail. And you can see she's dragging it to show more detail. So if you can see that the days of the week were almost completely hidden because we had the calendar crunched so much. but you could also switch on or off. I forget how many levels can we have up there? I don't
Um, oh, like I think up to about 10.
I thought
I
it
don't
was
know
10,
anyone who does more than
3 or
two,
4.
three. Yeah, maybe
That's a
4.
lot.
Yeah.
Half your
Um,
schedule is the calendar. That would be
yeah.
great. So yeah, so she turned off the day of the week, so you don't have to worry about those letters showing up there. But certainly it's configurable. You turn on and you could switch it. You can save that. You can have multiple views of it and save it, as Megan mentioned. So you can see there's lots of different. You may just have, in addition, you may have the number of the weeks into the project. Week 52. Lots of ways to show that. I also, and I'm just punching through questions here. So there was a question about, while Microsoft project doesn't support but 10 baselines, file save as will save the whole thing, and why isn't that just as good? And Megan kind of talked about this, but really at the end of the day, the challenge is a whole separate schedule is much harder to compare on screen. Now you can have them in different tabs, you can try to tile them, but a baseline shows a comparison by activity. You can just switch those on or off. And that's a terrific way to examine where you fell behind or are you ahead. A file save as won't accomplish that. The other thing is just the sheer management of all those files. The baselines for, now you can separate them, but the baselines for Power Project are built into the single file. However many baselines you want. Now you can extract those. The most common reason is because either the people don't want such a large file. If you had a very large schedule, they're not terribly large for a moderate schedule. But the other reason might be if you're going to ship it off to the owner, you may not want to include all of them. The other quick question was about interoperability, and I know Megan, I think you mentioned this, I can't remember, but just the ability to import export, all the different file formats. If you want to go over to the file menu here, so that people can see that functionality. But I think the screen is kind of frozen right now. But you can see that we can import Microsoft Project XMLs. We can also import MPPs if you've got Microsoft installed. The MPP file uses their engine. We can import and export to those. We can import and export to Primavera P6 formats. We can do the same. We can even import SureTracks if there's any. I didn't put that on the poll. If anybody's using SureTrack, that's a now sunsetted application from Oracle.